Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of the DrEnderPickles Show. Today, we have a very special guest. We have diagoporotin. Hello, Porotin. How are you doing?
I'm doing good. How are you doing?
I'm doing fantastic. Let's just jump right into things. How and
All
when did
right.
you find 2B2T?
Well, I've actually been sort of like looking back at a couple old screenshots because most of my screenshots came from like my old laptop. And my earliest screenshot that I can find was around August of 2016. But the thing about 2B, how I initially sort of found it was it was, sort of like early 2016. I sort of got bored with Minecraft in general. I was mostly just playing other games like CS at the time. But something that I've always been like interested in was sort of like the history of certain games. There's a YouTube channel called Retro Ahoy that sort of did videos about like the history of like Half-Life and stuff like that. And they did one on Minecraft, and I was like, oh damn, I kind of want to like dive into that. And around that time, it was sort of May. There was a YouTuber called the Camping Rusher who was making videos about like the oldest versions of Minecraft and stuff like that. So I started watching those, and it's strange because like I remember Jared telling me about how like the Camping Rusher sort of found like a Reddit post by Yellowstone Joe about like 2B, and that's how he found it. But like I vividly remember like he was already doing videos about like the oldest versions of Minecraft and stuff like that. And then he made that video about 2B, and that's when I first, heard about it and joined it. So I'm not really sure if Jared's right about that, about like him just finding that Reddit post. But at, at that point, he was already making videos about like old things about Minecraft, and that's sort of how I found out about 2B. Um, so yeah, it was sort of through that because he was already making videos about like old shit from Minecraft,
Yeah,
and
and
from
how does it feel looking back and realizing how long it's been since Rusher joined and realizing that like nowadays you're kind of considered an older player, right?
yeah, no, it's a little weird because like I think that's sort of something that like I've always been sort of like not privy to like thinking about, just like the idea of like, oh, now like I'm an older player because like most of those people from like 2011 2012 like they they were playing for like 4 years, right? I've been playing on this by the time it was like 2016. Now it's 2022 and I've been playing for almost like what, 6 years more or less. But obviously it hasn't been very consistent. I think I sort of stopped playing to be, consistently around 2020, but I'll explain why later,
Yeah,
I
it,
guess.
it, it kind of begs the question about what's more important to the community now. Is it more important like when you join, like specifically, or how long you've played? Because now we have a situation where people are joining from a very popular time in the server's history, but technically they've played for a really long time and probably more than a lot of the older players who joined. So it's kind of a weird situation where, what do we value the most? What do we value more, you know?
Yeah, I don't know because like recently, as you may know, like I've started playing again a bit. A friend of mine bought me Prio, and I think one of the things that benefits me when it comes to the fact that like, I've been playing for quite a while now is the fact that like I just recognize people and people recognize me. Like obviously, new players will not know my name because I never really try to make a name for myself. But there are players like Negative Entropy, you, Joey, and stuff like that. And from there, knowing these people and having these relationships with people for so long, right? You sort of gain access to being part of different communities, different builds, and stuff like that, which I feel like has been a lot more easier for me to sort of come back. Like even now, even though I'm doing this solo build, like I've had like invitations to like different bases that have been going on, and like I'm excited to see like where those go and whatnot. But I definitely do think like if you've been playing consistently, even if you don't try to make a name for yourself, you are still going to have like that sort of recognition or sort of being a part of that community to the point where people are going to be like, hey, oh yeah, I remember you from like that one base in 2017, like how you been and whatnot. So I definitely do think it's important. Like, obviously, there's a difference between joining one day in 2016 and then playing in 2021 or whatever, but you know.
Yeah, and kind of speaking about some of the people you met along the way, like Negative, Entropy, and Joey. Who were some of the first people that you met when you joined, and that maybe some of the ones that kind of stuck around the longest?
Okay. So when I first joined TB, and this is something that I do have a screenshot of, um, is of the Nether spawn. Because initially, obviously, I didn't know anyone from TB. I also didn't try to invite any of my friends on TB because I knew they wouldn't really like it. Um, I remember in Nether Spawn around 2016, there was a obsidian sign of a player's name, of Jared 2013, and I remember thinking how like egotistical that must have been to like just write your like IGN in like full like obsidian blocks. So I think he was definitely the first player I heard about. But the first player I interacted with was God, what was his name? It was Sir Ryoko. It was some he was kind of weird. Like he would always beg for stuff in chat and whatever. And at that point I was kind of like not doing the same thing. More I was just like trying to figure out like people who were also new because I didn't want to really interact with people who already had gear because I didn't really trust them that much. So I think from there we sort of like made a base. But one of the earliest people I do remember like basing with and like being really good friends with is Nifty Robo, if you ever heard of him. Um he was pretty chill. Right now he's like drawing porn for a living, I think. But yeah, Sir Ryoko, Nifty Robo. Oh God, who else? Oh, Fluffer. I remember Fluffer was um someone who I met very early on because it's kind of funny because I think she sort of started playing like more frequently around the time that Russia joined, and I just remember her being very active in chat and like DMing her sometimes. But yeah, those are some names that I remember.
Yeah, and what were some of the first big bases that you were involved in whenever you joined? What was kind of the those big experiences that kicked everything off?
Oh wow. I think the first like serious like big base that I was a part of was because like I think around like early 2017 I joined Imperium mostly because at the time I was friends with this guy named Dom, and he had his own little group because I was never really that privy to like the whole like LARPing and like group sort of dynamic. I didn't really like it, but I was friends with Dom and he had his own little group, and his group sort of like died down, and a lot of them started joining Imperium, so I sort of like follow along with it, and from there I sort of joined this space called Empire's Edge, which I think FitMC made a video about at one point. It was very much just like the best way I can sort of describe Empire's Edge, and if you ever sort of like seen builds of it, is that it consists of a lot of just like random shit that me and like a lot of friends at the time built, but also like a lot of really nice builds. Like we built like this ship, like this sort of like warship that was really nice. We also had someone from Constantium join at one point. This guy named Slimestoner, and he was friends with Ormonger, which was kind of weird. And he was really good at like as his name like implies like with redstone and stuff. Um, and from my own like personal experience, he was probably like the best like base mate I've ever had because he was very like nice. He was like this German dude. And it sucks because after Empire's Edge got griefed, he sort of stopped playing because I'm pretty sure he got pissed at us because I think one of us leaked it or something like that. I'm pretty sure there was like an inactive player at the time who just like leaked it for whatever fucking reason. But that was definitely one of the first like major bases I was a part of.
Yeah, and what was kind of the extent of your involvement in Imperium? How far did that go?
So like I said, initially I had joined Imperium because my friends group sort of died down. It was called like Order of Lucifer. It was some like stupid shit. Um, and initially I was very active in Imperium in like early 2017 and stuff like that. But that was mostly because at the time it wasn't, so much of like as it would later become like sort of like this thing where it's like, oh, we're gonna invite as many people as we want. Like it was more secluded, I feel like, because there were like at the highest point of Empire's Edge, there were like 24 members, and we all knew each other very well. It wasn't like we were just inviting random ass people. Um, and like I said, like I was very close with people like Slimestoner. Nifty Robo also joined at one point. I think I invited him, Dom and stuff like that, and even Emperor to a certain extent. Um, there were a lot of things that we sort of did early on that was kind of funny. We used to do a lot of like just like we used to fuck around with a lot of people. Do you remember Smack Attack 86 by any chance?
Very fondly. You might also know him as the Demiurge
Did,
nowadays.
really?
Yeah, he changed his name to the Demiurge. I think because he thought it like sounded cooler or something like that.
Oh man.
Yeah, he's a huge loser.
Yeah, no, like it in like 2017, like he was like I don't know what's up with this kid, right? Because I think he was like bragging about the fact that he joined in like 2013 and stuff like that. And like he tried to like make a name for himself. And I remember Emperor and I like we were very tempted to like troll him because he was very much like, like this fucking loser who was just, making videos about himself on fucking YouTube. So what we did is that we had and like I remember this vaguely, and Emperor was sort of telling me about this because I was asking him. We held a fake election on in Imperium between Emperor and Smack Attack, and we faked it obviously, and we made Smack Attack like the leader of Imperium. And then from there, we sort of like gained his trust because now he's like, ooh, he's the leader and whatever. And so we did is that we were like, oh, okay, we're gonna do like a gladiator fight, right? So we were able to make him like set his bed spawn with like um at like this like sort of like build that we were making to like have like a gladiator fight. And obviously what we were trying to do was bed trap him. And not only were we able to bed trap him, but we were also able to bed trap like a real friend of his who also decided to join. So we bed trapped him, and then after that, we griefed his base. It was some like shitty build that he was bragging about. So we were able to do that on the same day, and I think there's actually a video of it online by City Boss because he was there for some reason. Um, so yeah, we sort of did a lot of those things early on in Imperium where we would just troll people who we thought were just like you know weird or like losers. People like Winbid J, if you remember who she was. Um, Smack Attack. This guy named Willie, some like British dude. Just
What was Smack's reaction to getting bed trapped?
oh man, okay. Man, there was a lot because like at first he thought that it was a joke. Like I remember he was like DMing in the Imperium chat because after we had bed trapped him, he started like spamming, and then we just kicked him out of the Imperium server, and then obviously we griefed his base. I think later on he got like a friend to get him out of the bed, but I think he got really pissed when he realized that we also griefed his base at the same day. And that video that I was telling you about, where like we recorded basically all of that, I think he saw it, and God, I really don't remember his specific reaction, but like, um, but after that, like he sort of stopped talking to a lot of us. But Emperor, like I was asking Emperor like whatever happened to him. I remember he was telling me about how like he got super like personal about his life. He started like sharing things about his life, and it kind of got like sad at one point because he's as much of a loser he is. He also does have like a bit of a sob story behind him. So I think at that point they also decided to stop messing with him. That was the only time I had ever messed with him was with that base and bed trapping him.
Oh yeah, he does that
Um,
to everybody. He gives everybody the same sob story when they mess with him too hard. about how like he's some
Yeah.
like band kid who got bullied and like all this shit.
Yeah, just like I'm pretty sure that was just like his way of sort of like coping with the fact that like, there were people who were actively trying to fuck with him. Um, but it worked, I guess, because after that we didn't really mess with him because it just felt like a shame. But whether or not, his story is true, like we had a good laugh about it. We had our fun. Um, but no, like that was sort of like Imperium early on. It was mostly just like a group of friends fucking with people. And I think later on it became sort of like when this player, Jumpy Blaze for the win or whatever his name was, when he joined, right, it started becoming more of like a spawn fag group, if you know what I'm talking about. Like,
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It became a lot more toxic during that period.
yeah, but I think my favorite experience in being in part of Imperium was like a little bit before that with the Six Incursion. That was probably like the most fun I ever had on 2B. Were you a part of that by any chance? Because I don't really.
Sixth incursion, maybe. My memory is not the best when it comes to incursions, but I was involved in at least two or three of them, to some degree.
Yeah, yeah, no, I think I was like vaguely involved in like helping Tavix during like the fifth incursion. Tavix being like this player who, oh god, he was so cool. Honestly, like I really liked his videos. That was another thing too. Like people around that time, like 2017, 2018, they were making like these like griefing videos and stuff like that. Like that was probably the most fun I had, like watching like 2B content. Besides like, um the shit that was being like spewed by like FitMC and stuff like that. Like actually seeing videos from like the 2B community of like, bases getting dumpstered or like these really cool builds. Like, do you remember Mines, the YouTuber?
Yes, I vividly remember mines because he toured Shenandoah and he toured a lot of other different
Yeah.
bases.
Yeah. Right now I was just like thinking about him. I was like, damn, he was like, because obviously like he was making these YouTube videos, but he was also part of the 2B community. Like he was very chill. I think he toured one of my like earliest bases from like 2016.
Yeah,
The
it's
city.
very rare to find content creators like that on 2B these days that are as involved in the community as they are in making videos.
Yeah, I feel like that was sort of like the difference between now and then, because like initially a lot of the sort of YouTubers. Even FitMC to some extent early on, he was mostly just like this guy making videos about 2B. I don't really think he was at that point, like by 2017, looking to make revenue off of it. I think he was
Oh
just.
yeah, I mean you had people back then like Tavix, Oxymoron, Tim
Yeah.
McVance, like all
Oh,
who like they all played the
uh,
server, but also made like tons of videos on the server. Like there wasn't like there wasn't as many videos about the server, more or less just on there experiencing it.
yeah, no, and it's so wild because like there was like a certain aesthetic to them. It's so funny because like I remember I started going through a lot of these old videos recently, and a lot of them are just like, oh man, that's a good choice of like song for this because a lot of people would choose like these really like good ass songs for like griefing videos, especially like the Fourth Reich with like Tim McNewpants and stuff like that. So they definitely had like a certain vibe to them, if I remember correctly. But it sucks because a lot of them are like have either been like privated or just like deleted.
Oh yeah, and I mean even Fit himself, like you were saying, like he would make videos like on the actual server, doing stuff on the server. Like nowadays he's making videos about stuff that's happening. You know, he's not directly involved in any of it. It's kind of a shame now because he doesn't have like an opposition to keep him on there doing stuff.
Yeah, and and I honestly feel like at some point in like mid 2017, like heading on to 2018, there was sort of like that golden period where like, people who had joined since Russia, right? Those who like had decided to like stay were like now part of the community, and at that point, I was able to recognize like a lot of players, and I had spoken to most of them, and I might be wrong about this, but like I remember at one point the queue being super low after like the whole Russia thing died down, because not only was there like more of a like tight knit community, but also like there were players like House One, lagging the server and stuff like that, which definitely like made new players trying to join like not want to play. So like I remember very vaguely like joining to be like joining the server like trying to you know get on without prio, and I was like in position 40 or 50, and I was like, damn, you know things are sort of like dying down. This is pretty nice, but obviously now it's not like that. And I think that mostly has to do with the fact that like so many YouTubers and Venom and stuff like that, they made videos about 2B later on, and I guess the hype really hasn't died down. I don't know. It's weird because like I do remember like a certain period where like things sort of like went back to normal, not normal, but like things were sort of like becoming more like consistent. I
Yeah,
guess that's the
and
best
I
way to
feel
say
like
it.
maybe the like the audience when it comes to Minecraft content has changed to where like we used to, and in video game content in general, because you used to have like even in World of Warcraft like videos like the infamous like funeral raid video where they're like all the
Yeah, yeah.
people, yeah, like videos like that, like they used to also be the same thing with Minecraft, like where there were videos of like griefing and videos of touring places like in the actual game, where nowadays like we've gotten to this form of YouTube where the most popular content is like this documentary like analysis, like hour-long analysis type stuff about events that are happening without any kind of participation, any kind of actual footage of it. It's just like a narration. That's what we've gotten to now. So I
Yeah,
think just the maybe the focus of content creators when they're looking at what is popular has shifted towards that direction instead of actually being present for the event and actually filming like the event itself. It's
yeah.
easier to produce and it's more popular.
Yeah, and you can definitely make like these super long videos about it, and that's so funny that you say that because like like I was saying earlier, I had initially joined 2B because like Russia sort of advertised as like, oh, the oldest server. Like obviously it definitely wasn't, but like even then like people like Russia were sort of exploring the server themselves. They weren't making like these documentary videos about like things that they weren't a part of. Like at least he was actually playing on the server. Um and that's so interesting too. Like just yeah, I never really saw that shift in like, content.
Yeah, the
It-
difference in like experiencing versus explaining. Like
yeah.
it's like two polar opposites, but one of them is just so prominent right now compared to the other.
Yeah. Yeah,
But
no.
besides all that, let's not dig ourselves into a hole of like content creator shifts and
Yeah.
paradigms and all that stuff.
This is about TV, so
Yeah. So tell me a little bit about why you chose to repair a swastika base, based it off Topia work.
Oh, how did you figure that out?
Oh, I just typed your name into Wiki like 5 minutes before this interview, and like that popped up. So
Okay.
tell me
That's so
tell me
fun.
a little bit about that. Yeah, if we're being honest, I mean that's what I did. But go ahead.
Yeah. That's kind of interesting because, like, man, I think at that point in the server, like, because like one of the earliest things that sort of like attracted me to 2B was visiting old bases. And this is something I feel really disappointed about because ever like if you try to visit old bases now, they're completely like obliterated. Like there are groups dedicated to just like completely like destroying bases. But back then I was really interested in like a lot of old bases and stuff like that. And one of the first ones that I sort of visited was the swastika base. And I think something that sort of like really resonated with me about that base, not I'm not, first of all, I'm not like a Nazi sympathizer or anything. That's not where this is going. But the thing that really resonated with me in regards to that base was just like how insane it was. Like just this idea of like this like because it was like sort of like this weird pyramid build, and inside they had like this cube with like stairs that sort of like replicated like seats, and so like early on when I had found it, I sort of like imagined like, oh, this is probably like where they, where the players who made this like met up, and like this is where like they would like talk or like fuck around, and it was like super like it was kind of inspiring because like it really like resonated with the fact that like the one thing I really liked about 2B was the fact that you can get like a community of people and make insane shit like that. So after, being part of different bases and stuff like that, I sort of took a step back and went back to that base. Because I think around that time, someone made a post about that base saying like, "Oh, it's still standing relatively," and it was like it wasn't really that griefed. So I was like, "Damn, I'm gonna head back to this base that was one of like the first things I went to and try to repair it." And most of my reference in regards to like repairing it were like old screenshots. I think at one point I messaged I forgot who I messaged, but it was like this old player that XCC2 referenced to me because I had asked him on Discord, hey, do you know who built this? Can you give me any context in case, I plan on rebuilding it? And I remember that person sent me a bunch of screenshots of like the interior and stuff like that. So from there, I sort of made a sort of like blueprint of how to repair it. And after I repaired it, the same person who made the original post about the swastika base being like slightly destroyed made another post saying like, "Oh, someone's repairing it," and I think from there like people sort of understood like what I was trying to do, and some people came to help, but it was mostly just me. It sucks though because around that time there were players like Retronaut who were like purposely destroying bases like imps and stuff like that. So after a couple months of doing that, Swastika base was completely destroyed. But I had my fun, honestly. It was nice sort of heading back to, you know, bases like that sort of like you vaguely remember and then you go back to seeing them. It's like, oh shit, it's still here.
Yeah, and speaking of like people like Retronaut, did you have any other kind of clashes like that with people on the server that maybe were like group leaders of factions or kind of had some sort of like semblance of power on the server?
I mean, because like if I were to say like right now, if there are like any people that I'm like clashing with currently, like there are none. Like right now, I've sort of let bygones be bygones. But back then, obviously, like Retronaut with his stupid little group, I think it was called like Infrared or some shit. Obviously, I was in conflict with that because like Imperium was, so it was only part of that faction sort of thing, I guess. But but for the most part, when it comes to like individual players, I remember I had a lot of like spite against I hacked Walmart for some fucking reason. I think it's because before he was like this like spawn fag, he had based with me actually, and he was like a nice base mate. But for some reason, he started like obviously maybe it's because like he was young at the time, and so was I. But he started like becoming like a spawn player, like just crystalling every day, and I got like really resentful about that because he was a good base mate. I remember we had a stash together that he griefed for some reason. Um, but yeah, besides that, I remember I tried to early on push Hermetic Locks buttons a bit when he started making the his world famous spawn base. I remember like actively trying to like annoy him, but I don't think that worked.
Yeah, and speaking of Hermetic Lock, as he is a Mason himself, what kind of prompted you to kind of get involved with Spawn Mason activities?
Um, well, I was never a spawn mason because, like I said, I was a lot younger, around like 2017. So I was, kind of always trying to like push his buttons a bit, like just mess with him. But at some point, like, through Imperium, we sort of started like, cooperating with the Masons on projects. And I think from there, that's when I started meeting like people and like being more mature about it. People like Joey and stuff like that. Um, and I think one of the big things that we sort of like collaborated with, Imperium and the Spawn Masons were just like a variety of like spawn builds, the six incursion, like we were saying earlier, because the six incursion mostly consisted of three groups, if I remember: Imperium, the Spawn Masons, and to a smaller extent Voco, maybe. I don't know. I vaguely remember Cold Snid being there, but yeah, I think through that, that's when I started like, meeting people from the Spawn Masons and realizing like, hey, maybe I should stop being so immature and like trying to mess with these people. Because I was always trying to like, get into conflict with people like Hermetic Clock. I don't know why, but yeah, I guess.
Yeah, and kind of speaking about maybe like your change in ideals, what made you want to leave the server during that period? What made you kind of want to take a break?
I think because like I said, the sixth incursion was definitely the most fun I had. Like all that, shit that we did in regards to like, using new fags as slaves, making the wall, getting to, conflict with people who were trying to destroy it. Like that's the most fun I had because like everyone was like super like it was a very like close knit community of like players from like 2016 and so on, and also like older players obviously. But after the sixth incursion, around like late 2018, um, I started seeing that like people from Imperium, like the Dark Emperor, were getting to conflict with Jared. Um, and like Jared was like a friend of mine at the time. I started playing on his Macrochasm server, if you remember that. Um, and I really didn't like that because at one point it became like a whole thing about like doxing each other. Like I remember Emperor literally DMing me being like, "Hey, do you have any information about him?" And I don't like that. Like I'm not someone who's very privy on trying to get people's personal information. Like that's not how I tend to deal with things, especially when I don't like people. So I think that's how like I initially decided to leave Imperium. Like I remember just leaving the server and just being like whatever. But I still played 2B for a while. But then I started hearing about players like Solar 86 and, Hama and the shit that they were doing, like the pedal larper, you know, whole situation. And I think that was the point where I was like, no, I don't want to play on this because now you have a community of people who are doxing each other. You have these weird like pseudo pedophiles who are like joining servers and intentionally posting like CP. It's like, no, that's not what I thought this community would be. And it's really disappointing because, this was right after the sixth incursion. And I don't know what happened, honestly. Like, if I try to remember, like, I think it was like a gradual thing where people just became more toxic. But it really was like, it was despicable, honestly. And, you know, by 2019, I was, playing less and less. And then, like, I was just like, you know what, I think I'm gonna take a break from 2B, and that's sort of what I did. And then COVID came, so there was even less of a point to play 2B because like I don't want to get addicted to just playing every day. So around that time I started focusing more on college and whatnot, trying to get like my AA during high school and stuff like that. So it was a very good idea personally to just like take a break during that time.
Yeah, and
But
what
yeah,
ultimately made you want to come back to the server?
um, a couple things, honestly. Like, I remember, when Henry added me to the pre-June server, we had like this 1.18 server that we were playing on. Do you remember that?
Yeah, I was on there.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And that was sort of like my initial like return to like interacting with people from the 2B community. And I don't know, there was something very like it was nice to like see you guys again. Like there were a lot of players, um, like Jared and you to a smaller extent because we hadn't really talked much at that point. But like it was nice to just talk to people from 2B who weren't fucking insane or like these weird like pedophiles. So I think that was like when I realized like, hey, like I actually miss a lot of these people because in my mind, like by the time I initially left, I was like, oh, I don't want to interact with any of one of these fucking insane people. But like I realized that like, there's the good, there's the bad, and there's definitely like, the worst of the worst, but if you just stick with, the good people or even the people who you enjoy talking to, it shouldn't be too much of an issue. And not only that, but also like around the time that we were playing on this server, I was still playing Macrocasm. So I was meeting people like Halt's account, and other like, people who were still playing 2B slightly. And they were telling me things about like how uh, people like Solar 86 were sort of getting caught for their bullshit and how like a lot of them were leaving. I think Sato 86 made a video about that, like, sort of like revealing like the sort of bullshit that they were doing, which was good. I think that really sort of deterred a lot of the um sort of like bullshit that was going on. Um so like I was like, okay, I think things are getting slightly better. Like um there's less of a incentive to like dox people because as Jared may have told you, like after that whole like doxing thing, like I think he sort of stopped doing that as much. I'm not too sure, honestly. I know Emperor really like took a blow when it came to that. uh so like it felt like 2B had become more normal, I guess. Like it became less of a toxic place when it came to that. So I was just like, I'm gonna join a bit, see who's on. Um, and for the most part, there's like no one on that I remember. It's kind of sad.
Oh yeah, the community's completely changed. But like on that note, I mean, what's kind of your opinion, given all of this, on the future of the server, and how do you feel about the current state as well?
Um, so something that I think sort of differentiates like the players from like 2016 to like, new players from like 2020 and onwards is like I think they have a wrong idea about the server. Like even when Rusher made his video, like I think most people understood that like this was not a server where you ask people for items. This is not a server where you say where your coordinates are and you expect people to come save you or whatever. Like it was never about that. It was always about like, fending for yourself or making a community of people you trusted over time. And I really think that a lot of new players now are under this idea that like, oh, 2B is like it's like an anarchy server, but like, people are gonna come help you. People are gonna, give you items, because FitMC says so or whatever. Like, no, like it's really frustrating because every day since like I got prio again, I always see people in chat being like, oh, can someone head to these coordinates, I'm lost and stuff like that. Actually yesterday it got super like the chat got super filled with that I decided like I'm gonna start bed trapping a lot of these people because I didn't know if they were just like, you know trolls or whatever, but like they're actual like naive, fucking children who are playing this server asking for shit. And of course, I end up bed trapping them because they don't know any better. So it's really disappointing to see sort of that change in mindset where, back then people understood that like 2B was a place where you had to sort of like make it for yourself, where now people expect everything to come to them. And I honestly think is sort of ruining the culture of TB, because like if you are self-reliant, I feel like there comes like a level of respect when it comes to that, and I'm not gonna respect someone who always asks in chat, "Hey, can I get items? Hey, can I get this? Oh, where's the nearest whatever?" Like, no, I'm not gonna respect someone like that initially, of course. So I feel like because of that, there's less of an incentive to make it a community out of people like that, which really ruins the culture of 2B. Because 2B was always about like, meeting interesting people, talking to them. Minecraft was always like a thing by the side. But now that people are super involved with like, oh, I want items, I want an elytra or whatever. It's like that's not what 2B's about. If you want an elytra, go play fucking single player Minecraft with some friends. Like, what's the point of that?
Yeah, and I mean, outside of that, do you have any like closing statements about what you see happening in the next year? I mean, it seems pretty likely that there's might be an update, and I mean, there's also a good chance there might not be. I mean, what do you see happening?
I mean, whether or not there's an update coming, like 2B has always been stuck in this weird like limbo of 1.12, and honestly, like I've kind of grown fond of it. I don't know, like out of all the updates to sort of have a server stuck in, 1.12 seems pretty fair. Like, good selection of blocks and stuff like that. But if it updates, I'll be fine with it. Like, obviously, I'll try to see what blocks I can use, like whatever new blocks they're gonna add, because I'm really getting into building recently. Uh, but in regards to like the future of 2B in like a year, I definitely feel like if people continue to sort of have this idea of 2B as like a place where like it's all about getting items and stuff like that, then there's not even going to be like a chance of a good community. Because right now, the communities that are active on 2B are like these weird, like spawn fag groups where like they give items to new friends, and then those new friends become like, spawn fags, and then it's just a continuing cycle. But there are still groups like, like Joey's group, who, are building stuff, they're having fun, they're getting to know each other. And recently I've been talking to Emperor, seeing like,
Getting their bases griefed.
well, yeah, that's always been a thing. That's another thing too, like, I don't like inviting new
Isn't it?
people
Yeah,
to bases.
isn't it like 9-3, like between Joey and Orson? I've heard like like they've griefed like maybe like two or three of bases he's at, and they've griefed like nine that he's
I
had.
didn't I didn't know that honestly.
Yeah, yeah,
Like,
the score's pretty crazy.
yeah, like I remember visiting one of them, and it's like these bases are like whatever, I guess. I don't know. There's a certain like level of like sincerity. I feel like when it comes to like building bases with people, like it's one thing to have like things like meticulously planned out, and then it's another thing to just have like fun with people at a base and stuff like that. Like I sort of divide those two ideas in my head oftentimes when like I'm joining a base. Like if Joey's telling me, "Hey, this base is gonna have a certain theme or whatever," I'm gonna be like, "Okay." But if, for example, when I invited him to the base that I'm working on right now, I kind of just told him, hey, you can do whatever you want. Obviously, like, don't make, weird shit that's like gross, but, just have fun with it. Um, but like, sort of going back to what you were saying, I think in a year's time, there are definitely going to be players who stay because they sort of understand the idea of 2B when it comes to like meeting new people. But at the same time, like I'm actively trying to make sure that new players who are asking for shit get bed trapped and stuff, because I kind of don't want them to
Well,
stay
yeah, I mean
here.
that's keeping with the spirit of 2B. I mean,
Yeah,
it builds character, it keeps with the spirit of the server, and you can't let that die, no matter what, no matter how many years we go through. Like 2B is always going to be 2B. There's always going to be people turning on each other. So
yeah,
I'm
I
glad to
definitely
see
don't.
you're continuing that tradition.
Yeah, I definitely don't want to become like, oh, excuse me. I don't want it to become a sort of place where like people are welcomed. I feel like, at this point in time, if you're asking for shit, right, you are going to get handed a really bad hand, either by me or the other players who, like to fuck around with, people like you. So, you know, any sort of advice that I can sort of give is just have fun, like making, you know, connections with people, like meeting new people. And if you're so concerned about items, like, you can always just inside a group or something, like have fun with it. Like like I made my first godson by like scamming people with map art. Like you know, it's not always about like getting handouts, you know.
So wise, so true, and I don't think there's a better way to end this interview. Paratin, thank you so much for being on.
No problem.
I appreciate it, and thank you everyone for tuning in. This is Dr. Pickles signing off.